You are aware we have, as Africans in every country, are working on two major international frameworks. These are the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and then Agenda 2030 of Sustainable Development of the UN. And then on top of that, every African country is trying to develop or is already implementing its own national development plan. So you have three frameworks that you have to make sure that they talk to each other. Because in fine, what we want is to improve the livelihood of people in the countries. Each of these frameworks talks to key issues: improving education, improving access to social services, production of goods, diversification, and you name it. Now, you cannot afford to have three monitoring framework different in a country, where you have one for your national development plan, another one for the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, and the third one for Agenda 2030. Because what feeds monitoring a framework are data. And data are very expensive to produce, to put together, so that they can be used in terms of indicator to follow up on a framework. That's why at the ECA, we are pleading for member states to work on a unique framework that will be feeding the three monitoring framework that we are talking about: National Development Plan, Agenda 2030, and Agenda 2063. Because the underlying source of what is needed to come up with a framework are data. So you need to produce data on a range, an array of issues: economic, social, environmental, and perception of people on one or other issues related to their access to services. If you produce this data, quality information, you can now from this data build indicators that will feed a unique framework that will help you to report on National Development Plan, on Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2033.
Perfect. Is that the same reasoning behind the Sahel and the conversation that you're championing tomorrow?
The Sahel is actually countries from the Sahel are doing the same thing. Now, why are we putting emphasis and having a special event on the Sahel tomorrow? As any other African countries from the Sahel do face a number of challenges, structural challenges: lack of diversification, lack of transformation, population dynamics, migration. But for the last 2 or 3 decades, we have seen that those problems have been exacerbated by a number of factors, including insecurity, including climate change issues. To give you an example, when you look at countries that are around Lake Chad, this lake, 40 years ago, it had several people living, having their livelihood around that lake, in terms of fishing, in terms of agriculture, in terms of people coming with their cattle to come for water. That very lake is now at 1/10 of the area that it was covering 40 years ago. So that means you have movement of population going toward the remaining of the lake chain. So all these have been putting a lot of pressure on already vulnerable and challenged countries. That is why the United Nations has started in 2013 to develop and implement a United Nations integrated strategy on the Sahel, to help countries from the Sahel address those challenges.
Let me ask you one question about the crossing together of different bodies. We have the UNDP and the World Bank that already have a hand with the Sahel, and the G5 as well within the Sahel. They've already have their own development projects and highlighted priority sectors. Is there a case of an overlap we might see? Maybe how are you handling that issue on overlap of duties or mandates?
First and foremost, I would like you to correct you. There's no such a thing as a plan of the ADB, the ECA, the UN, the UNDP. These are plans aimed at improving livelihood of Sahelian. All these organizations are developing these plans to support countries from the Sahel. As a matter of fact, because of their different mandate and so on, they can pick up one or the other of the issues to deal with. But it is about plans, programs for people from the Sahel. Now, you are talking about 3 or 4. Let me give you the bad news, is that we have so far 17 different strategies for the Sahel, including the one from the UN. This is an evaluation that we have made as the UN and found out that there are 17 strategies. Although the challenges that we have are huge, and no institution can actually think that they can solve this problem, help countries to solve this problem alone, but there's a need to make sure that these different strategies talk to each other. That is why, in terms of the UN, as you know, we have funds, program, secretariat, and other agencies, but we have made sure that we have a unique UN strategy. That's why it is called United Nations Integrated Strategy for the Sahel, whereby people who are dealing with education like UNESCO, others dealing with health like WHO, ECA with publications and knowledge product to support the Sahel, we all come together within a strategy. That's why we call it integrated strategy. And then we are also trying to make sure that we work with country-led machineries like the G5 Sahel, the Ministerial Cooperation Platform, to make sure that they are in the driver's seat. We reinforce the capacity to make all these partners accountable through their 17 strategies.